Hi, my name is Rachel. Welcome back to another YouTube video. In today's video, we're going to be talking about maxing out on the good lifts, the squat, the bench, and the deadlift. So if you've never maxed out before, this might be new information. If you're a powerlifter and you maxed out many times, it's probably something that's pretty self-explanatory and obvious, but I figured I'd make a video on it because you're not just gonna max out on some random day that you go into the gym and you feel really, really good. Like, yes, you can do that, but if you wanna see where you're truly at, you want to plan it out so that you can deload, you can build to where you need to be, back off, deload, and then get to that 1 rep max the next week. So I'm gonna give you 2 examples of my previous peak, my last peak that I did before maxing out in competition before having a baby, and then I'll give an example of what my goals are for this current peak and where I'm currently at, about halfway into the peak. So we'll hop right into example number 1 first. So before I get into the first example, I wanted to preface by saying, ideally, you're not just going from doing like sets of 6, sets of 8 to all of a sudden let me do a block where I just run singles. Yes, you're still gonna have some back off volume. I still have back off sets of 5, even 6, even when I'm in a peaking block, but my main sets are not 5 and 6 unless it's like a secondary day or something. But I'll say that the most simplistic way to look at it would be 12-week prep to get to a 1 rep max, and then a deload, and then your competition. So you would do a 4-week block where you're doing heavy triples, working up to a heavy triple by the end, and then you back off again, and then you're doing heavy doubles for the next block of 4 weeks, back off again, and then you're doing singles for the next block, build up to the heavy single by week 4, deload week 5, and then week 6 would be your competition. That's a very simplistic way to look at it, but there's a lot of different other ways that you could approach it. And there's a lot of different methods. So I'm curious if you've peaked with the different method, let me know what you've done in the past, what's worked well for you. I've done a lot of different ways, but that's like the tried and true go-to, where when in doubt, just triples, doubles, singles. So the first example that I'm going to show is going to be a staggered peak. So you'll see that I tapered my squats earlier in the peaking block so that I could give myself a chance to recover more for a heavy deadlift. And then the following week I backed off on deadlifts, and then I peaked my squat out the next week. So I kind of swapped it. Whereas bench, you'll just see a very straight linear approach towards the 1 rep max. And then a deload is very, very important. You're gonna add a lot more than you think if you get that deload week before you do a true max in a competition, or even just going back into the gym the next week. So I'd say on average, I get about at least 2.5 to 5 kg more on my squat than my last heavy single in training. On bench, I usually only get about 2.5 kilos more in the meet than I did in training. But obviously, if you're lifting more than me, if you're a man, you're gonna be peaking more. If you're just like really, really strong in your foot. If you're a woman benching like over 200 pounds, then you're gonna peak more and you're gonna be able to hit more, obviously, with a peak. And then on deadlift, I get a very, very drastic increase from my peak. So I'd say I can't even think about what this is in kilos on top of my head, but I'll get up to like 30 to 35 pounds extra what my last heavy single was in training before the meet. So I would say that deadlift, the biggest thing is just making sure that your nervous system is getting a break and that you're truly, truly deloaded and feeling fresh on competition. That's the most important day, or even just if you're going into the gym, you want to make sure you're feeling fresh before you get into that heavy single. So I'm going to hop into that example of the staggered peak next. So like I said, this is my most recent full example of a peaking block going into a competition. If you're curious of how the competition went, I did a video last week in which I compared 2 different powerlifting competitions. One was from 2021 and one was from 2024, which was my most recent one before this current one that I'm in. But anyways, on squat, you'll see me doing 235 pounds in week 1, 248 pounds in week 2, and then a back down to 235 pounds in week 3 so that I could focus on deadlifts. And then this was actually my current training max of 253 in week 4, so that was my heaviest. And then I just practiced with my opener of 240 pounds the following week. And then in competition, I just went for a 2.5 kilo jump up to 259, but I did have at least another 2.5 to 5 kilos on top of that in competition. Bench was not a very good peak for this one, and you'll notice my bench form has changed drastically since then in a positive way. But I did 155, 160, and then I failed 165 again, but my plan was to go linear into the meet and then go for 170 in competition, but I only ended up doing 165, but I still hit another 2 kilos up from what I ended off with in training in the actual competition. And then on deadlift, I started with 319, then I moved into 330 shown here. Then in week 3, I did an early peak up to 352. And then I ended up going for 374 and just very, very nearly missing it. I know that I had it. It was just a very misgrouped lift. Obviously no excuses, but week 4, I just did 336, which was 2.5 kilos under my opener, and it moved a lot slower than expected because I was really, really fatigued. So like I said, it's really helpful to actually taper your deadlifts appropriately, because you can add a lot more than you think from a peak. And then in week 5, you just saw me doing very, very, very light singles at 290, and then what you're seeing right now is just some back off deadlifts from the week, and then I'll hop into the current peak next. All right, and my second example of a peak is going to be very, very simplistic. So this is what I recommend you follow if you've never peaked out before, just a straight up linear approach. And also if you just want to go on the conservative end of things, maybe just hit a gym PR or just do like a more conservative approach to a powerlifting competition. So what I'm doing is just 5-pound jumps every single week on squat, 5-pound jumps every single week on bench, and then I'm doing 10-pound jumps every single week on deadlift. The benefit of this is if you're going more conservative, you don't think that you're going to be taxed and there's not going to be much interference between your squat and your deadlift. You don't necessarily need to do staggered weeks where you have 1 week where you're focusing on the squat and 1 week where you're focusing on the deadlift. So like I said, this is my current peaking block, and it's after just having a baby. So I'm taking a more conservative approach, and I'm treating it more like a practice competition, and where my goal is to go 9 for 9 and not lift anything that's an all-time PR, and also my strength's just not ready for it yet. So in week 1 I did 220, week 2 I did 225, week 3 I did 230, and my plan for week 4 is to just go right up to 235 and then taper down to an opener. My opener is probably only giving me like 220 to 225 for week 5. And then in competition, I'm hoping to go for anywhere between 242 and 248. And then on bench, same thing, just nice, easy 5-pound jump up. Started at 140, then moved to 145, then moved to 150. My plan for week 4 is to do 155 and then taper down to an opener in week 5, and then hopefully go for anywhere between 154 and 159 in competition. And then on deadlifts, started at 300, moved up to 310, then moved up, or I didn't move up yet. I haven't done that lift yet, but I'm planning on doing 320. What you're seeing now is my best deadlift of my postpartum off season. At about 5 months postpartum, I pulled 3 reps at 325 pounds. So I'm planning on doing 320 in week 3, 330 in week 4. Hopefully it's really conservative and leaves me feeling fresh going into the meet, and then I can taper off drastically in week 5, probably only doing like 290 pounds, just something very, very easy deload, and then just go for about 350 in comp. Obviously all the examples that I'm giving on like, oh, you'll hit 2.5, 5 kilos, 10 kilos more in competition versus where you're left off in training, those are all relative to the amount of weight that you're lifting. So if you're squatting 500 pounds, you're going to be adding a lot more after a peak than for me, where I'm leaving off the peaking block only squatting like 235 pounds. It's going to be a lot more drastic of a change. So just think like, oh, double it if you're lifting twice as much as me. But anyways, that is all for today's YouTube video. Like I said, I'm 3 weeks out from my next meet, so I'm going to be talking about the rest of the peak, how all that goes. I'll be talking about other lifting, health and fitness topics, so let me know if there's anything else that you want me to talk about in future videos. Thank you for watching. I hope you have a great day, and I'll see you in the next one.